on the Daily Drive. Property Fast Track with Charles Tarbey. Thanks to Century 21. Smarter, bolder, faster. Go to century21.com.au.
And right now, Charles Tarbey's in the house taking your calls. If you are keen on all things property, 13 12 83. Welcome, Charles.
Well, a nice nerd. Well, welcome, Nick. That's really nice, isn't it? So, nice nerd. I guess you know him very well.
Oh, I do now. He abuses me a lot, so I think that's a sign of affection.
He does
somehow.
know. He does know so much. It's always good to listen to him, actually.
Indeed.
Yeah. Charles, there's quite a few interesting stories around. Today we'd like to run past you. One is about, this has come out from Chris Richardson. He's an economist with Deloitte, Access Economics, and he's talking about gravity catching up with housing stupidity. And obviously not, a lot of people into debt, rushing to capitalise on soaring property prices, but could leave us with a whole ton of units in our capital cities that are just going to be left sitting vacant.
That process has already started to some degree. I don't know. Look, the headlines do make it sound worse than what it really is. But then again, that's what it's about. What do you call it? The AI to formulate. Mm-hmm. Attention in the heading, interest in the first two lines. I think it's a marketing formula that people use.
Clickbait.
And this seems to be exactly that. Look, one of the things that you do notice about the marketplace is that people have rushed and they have gone crazy with it. And there have been a lot of apartment complexes sold off the plan, and the biggest concern, and this could be the part of that impact, the biggest concern is the fact that many of these people are overseas buyers, and many of them may not be in a position to buy at the time that the properties are completed, and they're not going to be tracked down if they're mostly from Asia, which is what people have been saying. Not going to be easy to track them down and sue them for non-performance. So I would suggest that if that occurs and then all of a sudden there is an excess amount of stock coming onto the market, then buyers will want to negotiate, and it means that what the properties were sold for, they won't value up to that. And that'll impact on the rest of the people that have bought in that complex.
And will that affect the developers as well? Will they be left high and dry?
Massively, because most of the developers, their profit is in the last 15% of the apartments. And it's all wonderful when they all move through and they're all sold. But right at the very end, often the apartments that are left at the very end are the hardest ones to sell, and that's where the profit is.
Okay, so the claim is there's an oversupply of apartments on the East Coast. That's got to be good for buyers.
It is. It's not. Look, we can't put Sydney into the equation, parts of Sydney into the equation, because people still are buying off the plan here, and if they're in the right spot, they're going crazy. They're going, it's like people lining up and trying to buy, and there's a waiting list. I think it's the areas that, as you start to move further and further out from the city. I was driving along the Great Western Highway from Parramatta to Penrith the other day, and I noticed a significant number of apartment complexes just built in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
So they're on the highway, but they're not close to any shops or the transport or anything. Those sort of sites are the ones that I think will be impacted most. Those that have the lifestyle, the opportunity, etc., they're always very strong, particularly in the Sydney market. And the Brisbane market itself has also got an oversupply of that sort of style of property sitting out on the edge.
So do you think those types of unit complexes that are popping up in the middle of nowhere, are they doing that in the hope that infrastructure will catch up with them eventually?
Yeah, quite possibly. I think, though, Kayley, the problem is that's a long way away, and those are the sort of areas that are prone to price drop. They're the first ones to drop, and they can impact on the rest of the market. But again, if you've bought in a good quality area, it's going to be pretty hard for a price movement there, because people will want to still buy those.
Yeah, we were talking about the fast rail link between Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane earlier today. So if predictions are correct in that article, we won't see that until 2050. So nothing's going to happen in a hurry when it comes to big infrastructure like that.
It's something I'd like to be talking about then, but I'm not sure if that's possible.
We might get to that later, though. But one other thing that came out of this article today from Stuart Condy is that the financial firm Deloitte also believes that the unprecedented scale of household debt due to low wage growth and elevated property prices means the Reserve Bank will be forced to resist global pressure to lift the cash rate, which ties into our next story. A record number of Sydney-siders they're essentially taking on a 40-year mortgage. Now, I've never heard of a 40-year mortgage before.
It's very, very common in the US. It's common for people to take a 30-year loan, a 30-year fixed loan in the US. So people who could fix their loans now in the US US or did a few years ago were getting interest rate loans at 1.5%, and why wouldn't you for that period of time? The problem with fixed loans, of course, is that any debt reduction in those fixed loans draws issues from banks because they want their money they factored in for it to be 30 years. So you can't pay any principal down, or if you want to pull out of that loan, you've got penalties going out of it. So a lot of the concerns from the RBA recently were that too many people were taking fixed loans in Australia, and of course no debt reduction means if the market doesn't move upwards, there's no equity gained. And so they're sitting there 5 or 10 years later, haven't paid anything off their property, and there's been no movement in price, upwards in price. So that's what they've been concerned about. But 30-year loans are not uncommon in the US, so it'll be interesting to see how they try to introduce it here in Australia.
But a 40-year mortgage? Is that new to you?
I've never seen it.
Me neither.
Yeah, I've never seen a 40-year mortgage.
It's also been called a life sentence by one writer.
I think, yes, well, if you buy in the wrong area, sometimes you need 40 years to get the capital gain.
I think, though, with an ageing population, people are living a lot longer than they were a generation ago. And there's talk now, people, in 20 years' time, there'll be a lot more people living to be 100, which means you'll also have to work later in life because the pension age, eligibility age is going up all the time. So it may be the banks have to move with this situation and say we do have to offer 40-year loans to people, I guess, up to the age of 40.
I just wonder how they would do it, though. In terms of a 40-year loan, you can always sell your property, pay a loan out and go somewhere else. So the 40 years really doesn't matter. Well, it doesn't matter whether it's 25 years or 40 years.
All it's going to do is bring down the repayments, right?
That's all it does. So I think at the end of the day, if you put people into that position, into a false position, what could be a position of security when there's more insecurity out there, that could cause a problem down the track. I think that a 25-year loan has worked. It's worked for so long now. And I also think that fixed loans are a danger zone for some buyers. But right now, it might be time to fix a little bit of your loan, at least a portion. I've gotten my children to fix part of their loans and have the rest variable, so if they wanted to pay something down, they can.
Back to Kayley's point, many of these folks are restarting 30-year loans despite already being years into their mortgages. So people at a later age in life are beginning again, if you like. A big increase from 2011 to 14, it says, when refinances accounted for about 28% of transactions. Now there are 64 loan products on the market for those wanting 40-year loans. But in 2016, just last year, it was 20.
Right.
So it's huge growth.
It is another way of selling. It's another way of selling loans. It's a simple way of selling business. And I again, your point, Kayley, it means that the interest rates or the repayment's going to be lower to pay that, and it could put people into a false sense of security.
13 12 83. Charles Tarbey's here tonight. If you want to give him a call, he's got some real estate knowledge and some wisdom to share you.
And it's another report out today I want to talk to you about, Charles. This is from CoreLogic. It says home values in Melbourne are growing at a faster pace than in Sydney on the back of strong interstate migration and comparative affordability. Is that what you're seeing?
Absolutely. Melbourne was the pick, has been the pick for us. A lot of people are saying we're picking Brisbane. I think there's an ad that comes on your station that's got my name in it that says that I've picked Brisbane. Well, I don't know how that happened.
You must have at some point. Someone heard you saying nice things about Brisbane at some point.
It was John McGrath first. John, as many people know, is an exceptional real estate practitioner, and his name was there. And then one day I'm driving along the car and then they've added my name to it. But Melbourne has always been my pick. And it's been my pick for a couple of reasons. So the economy down there is far more advanced and stronger. Culturally, it's a far more advanced city. Price-wise, it hasn't gone crazy like the Sydney market has. So it's still a very affordable marketplace.
Okay, people still choosing Melbourne because they think they'll have a chance in the housing market. So, as you said, jobs are good, jobs are strong in Melbourne, so it makes maybe we're saying to head south of the border instead of north as we've always migrated up.
Well, the Melbournians are all heading north, they always have done, to buy their holiday homes up the Sunshine Coast and further up. So the money's going into Melbourne and slipping back out to the back door, back up to the Sunshine Coast.
Well, we'll find out more about Melbourne soon with Jeff Anderson, right? As we go around the grounds, we do this every Monday night. Charles, a couple of your officers call in and we find out. So, one report coming in from Box Hill later tonight, and also we'll head to Erina on the New South Wales coast that Kayley had the pleasure of spending a bit of the weekend in.
Toyne Bay. I was at Toyne Bay.
Oh, did you go to the one on the, what's that one?
Kim's? No.
I said the same thing. Did you go? Okay. No, Kaylee's Grassroots.
My budget doesn't extend to Kim's.
I haven't been to Kim's.
I went to the Tawoon Bay Caravan Park.
I've only heard about it. So
Yeah, me too. But it was fabulous. A lovely part of the world. We'll come back shortly with Charles Tarbey.
Nick Bennett and Kayley Harris with you, and Charles Tarbey here taking your calls. All things property on 13 12 83. You know, it's that time of year again. Time to talk about possibly building a high-speed rail link between Melbourne and Brisbane. I love this idea. The idea is not new, though. It's been under investigation in Australia since the early 1980s. Every federal government since has commissioned a feasibility study, but nothing has ever gone beyond the planning stage. That's because it's hideously expensive. You won't get any change out of $100 billion, I wouldn't think. But proponents of the project say it'll lead to the rapid development of regional Australian towns along that planned route, which will create thousands of affordable homes on a high-speed rail line, meaning easy access to job and economic centres. William Power is a Senior Policy Advisor with the Property Council of Australia. Good evening, William.
G'day, how are you?
Going well, thanks.
Yeah.
William, Infrastructure Australia says it's now or never. Failing to act will see these corridors required to build a high-speed rail line snapped up by developers. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, we were very supportive of the Infrastructure Australia report that came out last week. I mean, you're right, the high-speed rail comes up probably every couple of years, and it's something that's debated on both sides of politics. But Infrastructure Australia were correct when they said that it's incredibly important to protect the corridor the fast-speed rail would go down. As our cities expand, Sydney, Melbourne get bigger and bigger, it's getting more and more expensive and harder to protect that land that the rail line will need to go on. So they were correct in that we need to protect it, and we also avoid problems that we've seen in some projects, like WestConnect's project in Sydney, around compulsory acquisitions of land and property once people have built on it, and that's costly. I think the IA report said that across Australia, if we protect corridors now, we could save around $11 billion.
Yeah.
So that's big cost, big savings for the community and also industry.
So in particular, the agency's identified a 60-kilometre piece of land between Victoria and New South Wales, which would be the rail corridor. I'm guessing that every couple of years a light bulb goes off and someone at IA or associated with them realises that real estate keeps going up and up and up, and they want to get in before it becomes unaffordable. Would that be right?
That's exactly right, and it's smart to get in now. And I think its report said, I think in New South Wales there's about $5 billion in savings, and costs go up about 40 to 100% if you don't protect corridors now. So, I mean, I think it's something that keeps recurring. But what it really needs is political will. You need the federal government on board, you need the state governments on board, and you need them to, whether it's expensive or not, to take the bull by the horn, so to speak, and ensure that people in regional centres, but also in Melbourne and Sydney, can get from Melbourne to Sydney in half an hour, or you can go from Wagga Wagga to Sydney in a faster time as well.
I think it's 2 hours and 44, isn't it, from Melbourne to Sydney?
Yeah, just about.
Yeah.
It's Charles Tarbey. The capital city or the city of Goulburn would benefit immensely from this because you've got Badgerys Creek as well. And so I would suggest that would be one of the very, very first places one would look at investing. But housing affordability in Sydney and Melbourne is worsening. And see, most of the jobs are created in those two cities. So do you think high-speed rail would enable people to buy more affordable houses in regional areas and commute into the major cities?
Well, I think definitely. I mean, high-speed rail would definitely make it easier to travel long distances much more quickly, as we've just discussed. But, I mean, it's not the whole answer to housing affordability. In the end, what we need is more houses built in our major cities close to those jobs. And we also need to look at, expanding the number of jobs that are available in our regional centres. So potentially, at some point, more people are travelling to our regional centres rather than from them. And I think high-speed rail is a part of the answer here. We need to be looking at how transport is made more equitable, so people across the East Coast can travel more easily. But we also need to look at other answers, the housing affordability challenge we find ourselves in, which includes increasing supply in our major cities.
William, is the high-speed rail link more about developing regional centres, or is it about linking Sydney, Melbourne and Brisbane? the capital cities? What's the driving thing behind it?
Look, I think it's both. I think it's neither one or the other. The key part, what we really need to start thinking about in terms of transport is both not only the route and not only the type of transport, but also integrating that transport with the land around it. So for something like high-speed rail, it will definitely be about developing more so those regional centres and also those larger cities like Canberra and Newcastle, which really need that access. But in addition to that, it's also about connecting it more easily our major cities.
But we don't need to connect them now because you can fly there. It's so cheap to fly there. It costs you $39 to fly one way to Melbourne.
For sure.
Even cheaper. Like you're not going to be able to get a ticket on this high-speed rail for that.
Exactly right. But the point I would make is that prices on airlines have really come down as we've increased competition. And I think if we add another form of transport potentially from Melbourne to Sydney or Sydney to Brisbane, prices could come down further. Competition is always a good thing. And I think if we add another form of transport between those cities, I think prices could come down further and provides more options for people living in those cities.
William, you mentioned at the beginning of the interview that what it needs is a government to commit. We're talking about very long term here. The estimations are that it wouldn't be finished until 2056, the three-city link. So, and people, for a long time now, a lot of folks are very critical of government, saying it only really thinks about 3 or 4 years ahead of itself. Mm-hmm. Do you think that it's possible that somebody at the top leading Australia could have foresight that extends to 2056?
Look, I certainly hope so. I think some of the trends we're seeing, definitely in state governments around Australia, is really taking a more thorough look at strategic planning long term. Australia is growing, as we saw in the last census, at a great rate, particularly, states like New South Wales, Victoria, and also Queensland. So it really takes a political will and also long-term planning out of the electoral cycle to make sure big projects like this can take place. And I would hope, and it is a hope, that, someone up the top would have that political will and that forethought and that long-term planning to make sure that something like this can take place.
Just finally, mate, do you reckon, has value capture been a successful method of funding other major infrastructure projects?
It's a good question. Value capture has really become, a term that means a great number of things. And it's almost like a magic pudding that, big infrastructure projects can be paid just with value capture. But in essence, it's just another way of contributing to the project. And it's something that really needs to take into account the number and many other costs that are placed on development around a project. A big project like Sydney Harbour Bridge did initiate a betterment tax as it was being built. I think it raised about $1 million of the $6 million needed for the Sydney Harbour Bridge, and I think it was eventually dropped because the Great Depression happened and they could no longer place it on business. And Melbourne City Loop project is another one that used value capture, yet opposition from business meant that it wasn't as successful as it could be. And if you look overseas, Crossrail in London has used it, and also some projects in Hong Kong. But the key aspect to it is ensuring that you have a really good overview of the economy on a whole, and ensure that any additional cost you're placing on development or on business isn't undermining that market. It means that, it could undermine jobs or increase property costs for the end user.
Good on you, William. Thank you so much for your time.
Fantastic. Thanks for having a chat with me.
Thank you, William Power, their Senior Policy Advisor for the Property Council of Australia. Like I said, it's not going to happen in my lifetime.
I'd like to see it. No sleeper required. Now, Jeff, you got a good point here, mate. Regional Australia would benefit from a high-speed rail, but if you have too many stops, it won't be so high speed anymore, will it?
No, it certainly won't, guys. Look, we've just come back from Birdsville and spent our way coming back down through Queensland, New South Wales. So many country towns are just slowly dying. And they've got rail lines there, and I sort of think, wouldn't it be brilliant if you could have something? But, you can't have a train stopping at every town because otherwise it just defeats the purpose. So how do they choose what town's going to have life revitalised and which one's not?
Exactly right. That's my point, is the government doesn't have this much money to invest. And if they then go to private operators, you're going to be paying a hell of a lot of money to ride this train, because those developers are going to want to see, return on their investment. It's just not going to get off the ground.
Can't the government take out a 40-year mortgage at 2%?
Good luck with that.
Very good, Nick.
Let me know how that goes.
I think what has to happen is that the capital cities have to go up in terms of their medium density, or they're going to have to find a way to expand, and the only way is the regional areas. They've got to try and connect the regional areas. So stopping at all these different towns probably won't occur, but they certainly could at least have 10 stops between Sydney and Melbourne. Otherwise, councils and state governments got to get together and work out how they're going to cater for the growing population.
I just don't think we have the population to support it for this massive bit of infrastructure. We just don't have enough people in this country.
Jeff, from what you saw, mate, why do you think those country towns are dying?
Oh, look, I think sometimes it's where the industry's gone, and I think also it looks like the farmland, like the generational change there, where the young kids are growing up and they want to go to the city and work. So it's so sad. You'll see. And, some of the big shops will come in too, and they'll just knock out those small supermarkets and what have you. And you just see boarded up shops, and it really is sad. And the potential there for us to move some of our, some of our population into those areas. And I think I'm one of those people. I like to get into the twilight of my life, or my decaying years, as I like to call it. And I could see great potential in, if you've got your income sorted through a pension or your superannuation or what have you, it'd be a fantastic lifestyle in these places, but you have to have those facilities to go with it, like especially the medical stuff and things like that.
Yeah, you're right. Jeff, thanks for your insights, mate. Jeff's at the Basin in Victoria. Sounds like a nice spot. I've seen the dismantling of the rail line over the years. I first started out in radio in Moree, and you could catch a passenger train to Moree back then. It is really sad to see it being dismantled. That's another discussion, but I think rail is a wonderful way to get around.
It is, but it's very expensive to maintain. That's half the problem. You've got to have the numbers on the trains, the people wanting to go there to be able to support the infrastructure. Otherwise, it's just too expensive
Let's get breeding.
To run it. Coming up shortly after the break, around the grounds, a quick local area profile.
Yeah, 13 12 83 is our number tonight. Charles Tarbey here to take your calls, all things real estate. And later, we're joined by, Tom Panos, who's an auctioneer, who will be on Sky Business tonight with Charles Tarbey.
Time for us to go around the grounds thanks to Century 21's extensive national network of real estate agents. And it's always interesting to get a snapshot of a particular region and learn a little bit more about that area with the help of a boots-on-the-ground local expert. So joining us tonight, Christine O'Sullivan. She's from Century 21 Erina on the New South Wales Central Coast. G'day, Christine.
Hello, how are you?
Good, Christine. Charles Tarbey, good to have you on the show.
Hi,
and a great office that you guys run in Erina, and they relocated to a fantastic little spot, and they've got a lot of experience in the entire area. But Erina itself is one of those places that's obviously located on the Central Coast. I picked these two areas today because they are vastly different in the way in which they're structured. The Central Coast, of course, a lot of people assume it was just a holiday area for a very long time. And of course it is in part, but nonetheless it's a very strong residential area that has a unique access to the freeway, and you're not far from the city of Sydney. What made you want to sell real estate in Erina, Christine?
Yeah, good question. Erina itself is really close to Sydney, so it's only an hour and a half drive north of Sydney. We've got easy access to rail transport and the M-Way motorway, as you said. And there's about 30,000 people per day commute to Sydney for work. So it's really accessible to everything, but we've got a great lifestyle here, much quieter lifestyle, very close to beaches, including Terrigal, Womburrel and Avoca Beach.
Okay, so is that a commute that's manageable for people?
Yeah, a lot of people do it. The rail transport is quite good.
Yeah.
A lot of people say it can be better, but
sure.
It is quite good. And then, we've got that M-Way motorway. It's only 20 minutes from Gosford to the end of the motorway to Sydney.
Yeah, and that's been improved too with you look at the connecting services all the way through, catching up to the M2. That part between the where the freeway stops and then gets to the M2 down West Pennant Hills Road is what can slow things down, or down onto the Princess Highway, Pacific Highway, Pacific Highway,
yeah.
are the two areas that really slow you down. So I think once once they're open and they're well underway, it's going to make a significant difference to the pricing of areas in the Central Coast, which leads me to my next question. What sort of pricing would you get, or the median price for your area would be?
So the median sale price for a house in Erina is $800,000, and for a unit is $450,000.
Right, that's where it is.
So that's a significant amount of dough. And what about rental returns? What would I get back on, say, that $800,000 home if I'd bought it for an investment to rent out?
Yeah, $600 to $650 per week. So our median rental price is $600 a week.
Yeah, okay.
And our rental vacancy rate is quite low at the moment. It's always around 1 to 1.5%, so currently 1.5%.
Yeah, well, that's exceptional. The Sydney, New South Wales vacancy rate, in particular in Sydney, is 1.22% this last week, but we were toppled by Melbourne at 0.92% vacancy rate. Unfortunately, Perth climbed, and it's back up into the 9s, but nonetheless, it's still sort of hovering in that area, not going over the 10s that it used to. But in your area, that's a fantastic vacancy rate to have.
Are you finding a lot of
fairly stable?
Christine, are you finding a lot of people who can't afford to buy in Sydney, young families, are coming up your way?
Definitely, yeah. So we have a lot of buyers from Sydney, investors, first homeowners, retirees as well. Yes, we at the moment it's probably sitting at about 50% Sydney buyers and 50% local buyers.
Okay. And just to wrap it, what's the outlook for 2017? What kind of forecasts have you got for us?
So our population at the moment is sitting at around 335,000, and over the last few years we've had a growth of around 1% per annum. But recent stats that have come out from the latest census, where they think that there's going to be another 75,000 people move to the Central Coast over the next 30 years.
75,000 over 30 years. Okay, so a significant amount of people. Christine, thanks for your time. Christine O'Sullivan from Century 21 Erina. As we go to Century 21 Box Hill, Melbourne suburb. G'day, Jeff Anderson. How you going?
Hello, Charles. How are you?
Well, I'm very well, Nick. Nick was one that said hello to you.
That's all good.
Jeffrey, and you've got Kayley here as well. I'm even getting confused myself.
That's all right. Hello, Kayley.
Hello.
Now, Jeff is a very seasoned auctioneer as well, and he conducts a significant number of auctions right across Melbourne, not just in this particular area. So he has an incredible overview of the total marketplace in Melbourne.
So, Jeff, from an outsider's point of view, where is Box Hill in relation to the Melbourne CBD?
Kayley, Box Hill's approximately 14 kilometres from the CBD. It's a 15-minute off-peak drive. It's a plethora of trains, trams, buses and freeways to access the CBD, but peak hours, probably a 35-minute drive.
Now, home values in Melbourne have surged by 1.4% over the past week, faster than 0.7% rise in Sydney. That's according to CoreLogic data. What's going on, mate?
Well, look, we've got a very diverse community. It is primarily Chinese-driven, I must say that. We've got a 42% occupancy rate. I was born in Box Hill back in 1964, and there's high-rises now that are exceeding 37 stories.
Wow!
So it's becoming quite a high-density location.
It's not acceptable to lie about your age too, Jeff, I might add. That particular area, one of the reasons that the people became part of Century 21 guys is because of that overseas activity, the buyers coming in from Asia, all recognising the Century 21 name. And I've noticed a significant amount of activity there, but it's west, as Jeff's saying. It's only 15 minutes east, of Melbourne, Melbourne capital city. So why not? Why not go through there? What's the education levels like for a lot of the people moving through?
Very high. Look, I partnered with a Hong Kong lady, so we've got a partnership there where we run the Box Hill office. She's very heavily involved with the migration of the Chinese non-residents, and they do a lot of diverse selling to all sorts of things, from house and land packages in Point Cook, Berwick, and the CBD, Box Hill, but also vineyards and farms up in the Yarra Valley. They love the atmosphere, the clean air and the food and the general lifestyle that Australia offers. So we've got that arm of the business, and then we've also got the main residential side, which is, quite strong. We haven't seen any side of a downturn of any significance.
Median house price in Melbourne is $710,000 right now. Is that in line with Box Hill?
No, we'd be a bit over double that. We'd be 1.442.
Wow.
There, Nick. So, yeah, I sold a property last week at auction at 595 square metres of land. It had a 1960s brick veneer double-fronted, single-level, dated home.
Beautiful.
And that sold for $1.1 million, which was, just under $1,900 a square metre. The buyer intending to knock it down and build a large 40-square home.
The census, the 2016 census, Jeff said 2,000 new residents are moving to Melbourne each week, and it will overtake Sydney as the most populous Australian city by 2050. That's extraordinary figures for people heading to Victoria.
Well, it is, but I think we have an enormous lifestyle to live down in Melbourne, and although we're only 5 degrees at the moment, we're not too warm down here, but at the moment, but certainly enormous sporting activities. It's a cultural hub. Also in Box Hill of the eastern suburbs, we're only we're not far from the Dandenong Ranges, and a lot of people come to Box Hill to access the culinary delights of China and Malaysia and all sorts through Southeast Asia. We've got 38 restaurants within a 400-metre radius of my office.
I haven't had dinner yet. I don't know how you guys are feeling, but
I'm okay, mate.
To pull back on that, Jeff.
Yeah.
Good on you, Jeff. Thank you so
Jeff,
much.
thank you.
There's Jeff Anderson from Century 21 Box Hill in Melbourne, 13 12 83. Property Fast Track tonight with Charles Tarbey taking your calls, and Tom Panos takes us to the backyards of Australia. He's an auctioneer in a few moments from now. But first, Charles, let's have a look at vacancy rates. What are they doing?
Yeah, they are interesting. We were talking to Christine earlier on. The ones that has always been of concern, and I think you're also copying it up in the Darwin area, Perth area, anywhere where the mining areas were. They've got significant problems with their vacancy rates, and it's impacting on a lot of businesses because landlords, of course, are struggling with it. You've got people who were living in those areas no longer there, so small businesses are struggling at the same time. So it's having a big impact all the way around. And those people that did buy property and pay a lot of money for it, hoping that they'd get the good rental return, well, they didn't get the capital gain, and that's what they needed. But still, nonetheless, I mentioned earlier, Melbourne is 0.92% vacancy rate, so it's under 1% in Melbourne now. So, it's interesting, all the stats that we're looking at here tonight are really pointing south in a northerly way.
Yeah, definitely.
No, we know what you mean.
Yeah, thanks.
Clear as the day.
Sydney market's 1.22. So, again, Melbourne's outperforming the Sydney market in terms of vacancy rates.
All right, we'll go to auctioneer Tom Panos after the break.
There are some great advantages in being the world's largest real estate company. For a start, your Century 21 local office uses the best technology and knowledge base in the world. Combined with the fact that each office is independently owned and operated, your local Century 21 agent knows your city, your suburb, your town and your street. It also means Century 21 agents can offer a huge range of resources and experience, including information from over 300 offices around the country. It's no surprise, Century 21 is the fastest growing real estate brand in Australia. Buying, selling or looking for a new home to rent? Contact your local Century 21 office and find out why they really are smarter, bolder, faster. Visit century21.com.au. Now, it's officially the middle of winter, Kayley.
Yes, typically a time where the property market succumbs to the cold and slumps for a while, but we don't live in typical times.
No, indeed not. That's right. Markets around the country have bucked trends and defied logic in recent times, frustrating many. So has a typical winter freeze been avoided? Let's catch up with Tom Panos before he goes on to Sky Business tonight with Charles Tarbey, an auctioneer and a 2-decade veteran of the business. Hello, Tom. How's it going?
Hi, Nick. Hi, Kayley. How you going?
Hello, Tom. We're well, thanks. Charles here as well. Now, starting in Sydney... Hello, sorry. Starting in Sydney, listing numbers have been a little bit low, but the market recorded a clearance rate greater than 71% for the second weekend in a row.
Yes. Kayley, it surprised me as well. Like, if you told me 6 weeks ago on what the clearance rate would have been the week ending the 16th of July, I would have said it would have been in the low to mid-60s.
Yeah.
And it has surprised me because there was definitely a path where it was dropping a couple of percentage points a week, and then all of a sudden it changed, it stopped, went up a little bit, and now it seems to have found a pattern, and this pattern is over the 70%, and I'm pleased to say that even the auctions that I was conducting myself, the results were very good. I would say I wasn't getting 200,000 or 300,000 over reserve, but a lot of the sellers were high-fiving themselves at the end of their auctions. And even, I tell them not to do that in front of the buyers.
Tom, 72.9% was the clearance rate across the country, which is really quite magnificent. And the best capital performing city was Melbourne. Again, night tonight we've talked about Melbourne. Yeah. And the stats for Melbourne were exceptional. They came in at 77.6%. So they're really, really strong. And if you look at the Adelaide market, it was 75. So I don't know. Again, if you go back 6 weeks ago, 8 weeks ago, they were talking about that was it, reached the top of the cycle, we're finished. But it's still going, isn't it? It's still got strong legs.
Yeah, they performed all really well. Brisbane wasn't. Brisbane was a little bit lacklustre. I'm looking at the numbers here, Charles. It was under 50%.
Yeah, look at the Brisbane market has always struggled. It was 44.8% for Brisbane.
Yeah, 44.8. But Adelaide there, I'm having a look. They've got total auctions that they had was 65. So that's a pretty good spread of auctions to give you an idea of the state of the market. It is really good. Now, I've said it all along that 1st of September, we've got auctions on the 26th of August because I was booking auctions there. I've got lots of auctions booked on that day. And then I look at September. September is going to be the month that we're going to get a real look at what is the state of the real estate market in Australia. We're going to have ample supply of listings, and we're going to test the buyers. How confident are the buyers out there in the marketplace? So I'm really looking forward to talking to you in that first week in September.
One day in September, more exciting than the AFL Grand Final by the sounds of it, Tom.
Well, I do both. I actually drive to the results as it's going on. But
now, why is this September so significant?
This September is significant because we did get concerns that the tightening of money by banks, the barriers put to Asian buyers, such as double stamp duties, and all of those things were going to affect this marketplace. We always said that there wasn't a lot of stock on the market in winter, and maybe winter wasn't going to be a time for us to get a true taste of what the confidence is there and whether there has been a price correction. And I believe that September, where the stock levels dramatically rise, Nick, it's going to give us a clearer picture of where things are, but more importantly, to help us understand which segments of the market are working. Because Charles will tell you now that not all markets are the same. We've just got sub-markets and sub-markets. Now, we've got first home buyer unit markets. We've got first home buyer non-unit markets. We've got coastal areas. We've got, regional parts. We've got the inner city marketplaces. So having a large sample of numbers is going to help you understand what market is performing and what market has actually been impacted by tightening of money and other policies.
Yeah, that's a good point. All the guesswork's been taken out of it, hasn't it? We're very well informed now.
Correct. And I've got to tell you, the other pleasing thing that I've learned is that consumers in 2017 are so more educated. Like, I rock up and I have my vendors that say to me, Tom, I do realise that things aren't as hot as they used to be, but they're still pretty good. And I think it's the fact that whether you're on social media or you're driving along on a radio or whether, you're reading something, that people are consuming more media than ever because it's flying at them. So you've got a far more educated vendor than what you did in previous years.
Well, I tell you what, when you look at these figures from the census in 2016, Tom, Melbourne was the third fastest growing region in Australia, up 12%, and that's just as Charles was saying, all the arrows are pointing south of the border, are pointing towards Victoria and Melbourne in particular.
Yeah, well, look, I didn't follow the advice that Charles was saying. And
Bad for you, Tom.
I wish I had. I followed his advice over the years on a lot of topics, but I thought to myself, I'm going to give Melbourne a skip.
Yep.
But I can say that I would have had money in my pocket if I'd followed his advice a couple of years ago, because I do think that seems to be the marketplace that has got the most potential growth and current growth in it.
And Tom, I still think it has. I don't think the growth has finished in Melbourne by a long shot. So it's not. There's no interest. I have no direct interest in pumping it up, other than the C21 offices in that region. But I just think that it's got the infrastructure and good to go.
There's always hope for you, Tom, mate. Thanks for your time. Tom Panos, who's on Sky Business tonight and joins us again on Property Fast Track next week. If you're looking to sell your home, buy your next one, or find a reliable expert to manage your investment property, simply drop them a line and they'll help you achieve your real estate goals. Property Fast Track century21.com.au. Charles Tarbey, thanks for your time.
Thank you very much, Nick.
See you on telly tonight, and you're here next week on Monday. Kaylee, we'll see you tomorrow.
I'm out of here. See you at 5 tomorrow.
We'll check the news next. Trevor's after that.